You're listening to Power Talk, Berkeley Electric Cooperative's official broadcast about the cooperative, our communities, and ways to use energy wisely. And now, let's join our hosts for today's episode. Good morning and welcome to Power Talk. This is Micah Ponce, the Communications and Media Specialist here at Berkeley Electric Cooperative, joined as always by Miss Libby Roig, the Director of Marketing and Communication.
Good morning, Micah.
Another edition of Power Talk.
Indeed. And this time of the year, we were just talking about before we started recording that it's, you leave the house and come back as quickly as you can to the air conditioning because it's the time of year where it just, even at night, does not cool off. So,
and if you step outside and stay still for 2 seconds, you will find exactly how many mosquitoes are in your yard because they will find you in no time flat.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
it's a wonderful time. Great decision to live in the Lowcountry. Loving every minute of it. But we have a special guest in studio today, Miss Amy Langdon, who is now the newly minted Vice President of Information Technology.
Ta-da.
For those of you who might have listened to our show before, and we've had Amy on, she was previously the Vice President of Member Services, and now has made the switch over to the world of zeros and ones.
And not just the Vice President of Member Services. How many years did you work in Member Services?
Full-time, 21 years, a little over 21 years. So that's not counting part-time, summertime.
Yeah.
So, it's been a good 22, probably 23 years in Member Services.
So I think this is a unique change, and I thought it was cool when I first heard about it, that Amy switched places with the former Vice President of IT, Brian Reese, our colleague. He's now over Member Services, and Amy is now over IT. But I didn't realize how much your respective identities were wrapped into your former roles. So it's a little bit of a mind warp trying to figure out who's what and
Yeah, and I think we're still both very much both right now and will be for a little while. He has pretty much been in IT his entire career, and me in Member Services my entire career, so it's been a little bit of a struggle to turn that part of my brain off and focus on IT. I tend to drift back. I catch myself drifting back every now and then, so really excited.
Yeah.
I don't think either one of us expected to enjoy that switch as much as we did, and I think it's good timing.
Yeah, but let's back up a little bit and tell us kind of what the series of events were and the why behind the swap.
Yeah, so we've been doing cross-training within individual departments, just giving people different exposure to different areas that they're not typically exposed to.
Yeah.
And Mike decided to do a little experiment at the staff level. And given that I have education background in IT and Brian's a very personable, social person, he thought it would be fun to swap the two of us for 6 weeks. And it was. You get a different perspective from the IT side of, we do need them to email us a ticket so we can keep track of that instead of just picking up the phone and calling. And he got a very different take on Member Services, working in Member Services and seeing how IT things impact Member Services so quickly. So, but like I said, I don't think either one of us expected to enjoy it as much as we did. And, you spend 20 years in one department, you don't realize how, I don't want to say how much on autopilot you are, but it just kind of becomes the everyday routine, and something different and new was really nice. So super excited.
And I would think you and Brian are both always kind of looking for challenges. So I think the swap makes a lot of sense on that level. But there is so much crossover between those two departments.
So much.
Not to get too far in the weeds, but like our billing function is within the IT department, and and every co-op's a little bit different, but there's so much overlap and so much collaboration that can come.
Yeah, and all of the primary software that our members use to interact with us and that our employees use to assist members is all supported through IT. So again, just being able to help our members in a different way, in a different seat, with that different perspective has been very beneficial, I think.
Yeah. Fun.
Well, did you tell Brian that I will be contacting him late at night a lot of times with Google reviews or Facebook concerns or anything else like that? You need to prep him because, I expect an answer now, Brian.
Yeah.
If I text you at 11 o'clock at night, you better be answering me, buddy.
Yeah.
I
may have spoiled you with that, Micah. No, he's already gotten his feet wet a little bit with that. We've had a couple things pop up in the evenings that he's reached out and say, hey, what do I do with this?
Right.
So it's, he'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We're here for our members 24 hours a day.
Yep.
Well, and that's what I think is at the heart of the change is just because you were hired to be VP of Member Services and Brian was hired to be VP of IT does not mean we're stuck in that decision.
Right. And I think it's great too that as a leadership team and Mike especially, he's looking at the big picture as well and where we may be able to be a bigger asset to our members, and it may be in a different role. And so, I think the biggest thing for us is being open to considering that possibility and kind of going all in. And sometimes he's right.
Yeah.
Sometimes he's not. Insert eye roll. But yeah.
I fully support all your decisions, Mike.
Well, I mean, we clearly have an embarrassment of talent at the co-op that they can play different positions as needed.
Yeah. All other duties as assigned.
Indeed. Well, we mentioned it's summertime. It's July, which also means it's hurricane season, which lasts about as long as the heat does around here. It'll stay hurricane season until November 30th. So it seems like every year the headlines come out for the forecast for the fall, for the summer and fall, and it's always going to be a busy or above busy storm season. But the official outlook from NOAA, that's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, for the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season predicts a range of 13 to 19 total named storms. And that's storms with winds of 39 miles per hour or higher. And of those 13 to 19, 6 to 10 are forecast to become hurricanes, which is 74 miles per hour or higher. And then of those 7 to 10, 3 to 5 could become major hurricanes. And that's category 3, 4, or 5 with winds of 111 miles per hour or higher. So we'll, see what the weather rock brings us and what happens in the coming months. But we all know it doesn't take a tropical event to cause problems in our area. It seems every year a bad afternoon thunderstorm creates a mess. And just last month in Goose Creek,
I was about to say.
Yeah, Santee Cooper had some major damage to some of the transmission poles near Stratford High after a really short, intense storm rolled through. So less than 30 minutes of wind kept crews busy most of the evening to repair the damage.
Right there at the beginning of hurricane season 2, like I say, it wasn't hurricane, but we had to send folks to the upstate to provide mutual aid.
Yeah.
Mutual aid to some of our sister co-ops in the Midlands and the upstate because of those strong storm cells that just sort of pop up and move through. So, it doesn't have to be a quote-unquote hurricane or straight line winds or whatever they're calling them, or can do just as much damage.
Yeah, a good thunderstorm can hit you just as hard.
Yeah, and obviously during the summertime here we have those pop-up thunderstorms, and we just went through not that long ago, just seemed like a couple weeks of rain every single day, and then that tends to saturate the ground, and then the strong winds come through, and next thing you know, we got trees falling down. So it can be a wide range of things, from just your, like you said, your afternoon pop-up storms to all the way up to the hurricanes. So you got to be prepared and ready for whatever comes your way here in the Lowcountry.
So Amy, what are some steps that members can take now to make sure they're ready for a storm to hit the area? So
I would say the biggest thing we suggest, the most important thing, is making sure that your phone numbers on your account are current, updated, accurate. Our outage system, when members call, the first thing it looks at is the phone number they're calling for, and it tries to reconcile that with an account and an address. So definitely want to make sure your phone numbers are current on your account. The other thing is making sure you have Smart Hub access. So our outage map is right there, available in Smart Hub. It's also a quick way to see the status of your outage. So it'll tell you, yes, we're aware you're power is out and we're working on it. If we don't know, it won't say that. So you can report it right there in the app. For those who have medical conditions that require electronic equipment, we definitely recommend backups for that equipment, whether it's batteries or a generator, a plan for where you can go that does have a generator, because in those extended outages, there's really no way you can prioritize one service over another. You kind of have to restore everything up to that point before you can get them back on. So, we do our best to get everyone on as quickly as possible, but sometimes it may take a little while. And then, just on that same note, if you have a generator, make sure you know how to use it. Make sure you know how to ensure it's not backfeeding on the line. So when our folks are working out there, there's not a safety hazard for them.
And for the residents, too, that you're not getting carbon monoxide poisoning from the gas fumes. So, for your own safety and our crews, make sure you know how to operate it.
Don't put it in your garage and close your garage door. Try to keep it outside in the open air. And, it's a little loud, but welcome to hurricane season.
Yeah.
And one of the things you mentioned, too, is like the smart hub access. If you have to evacuate, aren't you able to log into smart hub and you can see, if you have power at your house before you come back? So you'll see, you'll look at your daily graph and you'll be able to see that, there's actually power flowing back to my home now.
Yeah, you can look at your usage graph and, assuming the power has been off for several days, you can see that it's kicked back on and when it kicked back on.
So it'll be like a little flat line, and all of a sudden, boop, signs of life.
Yep.
And you also mentioned, like I said, order of restoration. We try to get to everybody as quickly as we can, but if the main line's down, there's really no going to be a way we're going to be able to get power to your house. So we've got to from the
order of operations
from the substations to the main trunk lines to the distribution lines to your individual service drops. And if you got a limb on your line that leads to your house, that is probably going to be one of the last things that we're going to be addressing, because as you mentioned, we're always trying to get the most number of people back on as quickly as possible during those major outages. And depending on where you live, we serve a diverse population in our service territory. We've got the Sea Islands. I was just out on Kiowa not too long ago. We were in osprey mating season, and in your new world of IT, they were sitting on the communications tower.
How fun.
So I think there was a contractor who wanted to do some work, and we had to go out there and say, nope. You got a nest of ospreys with babies, and it's nesting season, and you're going to have to wait until next month before you can, or September-ish before they you can finally do it. So that's one of the things you get to look forward to.
Well, fun fact, we're actually setting up cameras over in the Osprey platform we built, so we can kind of keep an eye on that and have a fun little social media thing we can throw out there every now and then.
Our followers love critters.
So.
Well, like I said, we serve the Sea Islands. We serve municipalities like Goose Creek, St. Stephen's, Alwyndock Cross, Mount Pleasant, McClellanville, everything, Heather and Yon, and in between. And so, these are diverse areas, and it can affect the way that you get your service restored. If you're in the middle of Goose Creek, sometimes it's easier to just roll up to the pole. We can jump in the bucket, put a fuse back in, and we're ready to roll. But if you're in Wadmalaw out on the end of a line and in the middle of the woods, it might take a minute or two before we're able to get out that way and get your power restored. So we've talked about how members can prepare for a major storm hitting the area. How does Berkeley Electric prepare for storm season?
So I would say that's probably one of our main operational and strategic initiatives every day, every year. That's something, reliability is something that we're working towards every day. System resiliency and making sure that we can backfeed circuits and even just our metering technology, meters that can tell us when they don't have power and tell us when they do have power. So it's a lot easier for our systems to kind of pinpoint where the issue may be when we know exactly which meters are out. The other piece of that is right-of-way maintenance, which isn't always popular, but given the nature of our territory and the trees and just how things grow, how quickly they grow when it rains every day.
Yeah.
Keeping up with that right-of-way maintenance and making sure things are trimmed. So you don't have a limb falling, knocking power out every other day. We just went through our major storm plan training, which is something we go through every year with our employees. We go through and update all of our contacts and all of our agreements, and then we roll that out to all employees and make them go through and review and make sure everyone knows their role in that. So,
because, Amy, in your former position, you went from maybe doing a collection call as your normal 8 to 5, but that during a storm it changes to booking hotels or booking catering or a plan.
Your normal everyday duties are sometimes completely different than what they are in a major storm plan. We have folks assigned to laundry and booking hotels and cooking meals and checking in crews and all those different things. So it's kind of all hands on deck around here.
Oh yeah. Yeah, everything to support the guys making the repairs.
Right. And you had mentioned, the right-of-way part is not exactly popular, but we've got to maintain those right-of-ways, because, it's from an efficiency standpoint, especially when it comes to restoring power, we want to make sure that, we're not having trees drop into our right-of-way or limbs falling on the lines, but during a storm, they need to be able to access those right-of-ways. And if people have been dumping trash out there, our trucks aren't able to get back up into the right-of-ways. Some people plant vegetation around our pad mount transformers, which, if they get there and they've got bushes growing up in front of the transformers, makes it more.
It slows it down.
More time consuming for them to be able to do that.
I know one of the big challenges is in those neighborhoods, in the larger neighborhoods, you have a lot of fences you have to deal with. You have animals that are in those fences, and so that's why we push pretty hard to keep right-of-ways clean and those easements clean, because it slows things down. And when power is out, the number one priority is getting it on as quickly and safely as possible. And you don't want to be the reason your neighbors don't have power at the moment. So
And we saw with our meter upgrades in recent years that when a long period of time goes from us accessing our equipment to do maintenance, that things change pretty rapidly. That people were enclosing meters or, somehow
building
obstructing
decks on top of them. And all those kind of things. A lot of folks see the meter as an eyesore. They don't realize if your house catches fire, the first thing we've got to do is pull the meter and kill power. And if we can't get to it, that slows down the response time on slowing down that fire. So,
So the same with some of our, especially our underground equipment in a more established neighborhood like Crowfield that's been there for 30 or 40 years. And Crowfield loves its vegetation. I know that's why we bought our house there, is we love the mature trees and the natural buffers. But our guys have to be able to access it and then be safely working the equipment when there's an outage or something else going on. So
and our right-of-way guys, they love trees, they love bushes.
They're good guys.
So unfortunately, as part of their job, they do have to remove some of these things and they do have to trim trees. But I do it too. They're all trained arborists. All trained, we got trained foresters. They all make sure that it's done to industry standards. So it's unfortunate sometimes, but it is a part of the job that, we need to be able to maintain power efficiently and safely.
And just something, I think all of us forget sometimes is before you plant things in the yard, look up. Don't plop a magnolia tree right underneath a power line that's running through. That's not going to end well 20 or 30 years from now when we've got to chop it up. So just look up first.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I've driven by some of these new neighborhoods, and especially along the road, just under the lines. There's all kinds of juvenile trees, and I'm like, I'm not close enough to see what kind of tree that is, but this might be a problem.
Yeah, that's going to be a problem. Not today, but it's going to be a problem.
Yeah. Crepe myrtle, not so much, but oak tree.
Magnolia tree.
Well, all year long, not just during storms, safety is always our priority. And we've talked briefly what the restoration process looks like, but at the heart of it, we get it. We know when it's middle of summer and your power's out, it's miserable to be in your house. If an ice storm rolls through and you're without power, it's miserable to be in your house. And the longer it goes, the minutes just seem to crawl by. So we know our members are eager to have the comforts of electricity back. But Amy, if you'll walk us through kind of how we approach restoring power and what that process looks like.
Yeah, so the most important piece in the beginning is damage assessment. You kind of, especially in a large event, you have to figure out what you're dealing with. And we do that several different ways. A lot of it is, crews out there riding the lines, riding circuit, looking around. Some of it we get from member feedback when they're reporting outages, so we do pay attention to that. If you there's a tree on the line, we know that we have an issue there. So we get that information several different ways, but then taking that information and coming up with a plan on how we move forward. So, like Micah mentioned earlier, there's a distinct process. You have to start at the source and work your way out. And so that's kind of what you have to do. And I know it gets frustrating sometimes for those. I mean, I'm in Alvin now, so I went from living in Crowfield where it's maybe an hour to 6.
If we lose power at all.
Yeah, if you lose power at all, because everything's underground. Where out in the country, that's something that we have to be okay with. That's it's great not having neighbors right on top of you. I will tell you that.
Yeah.
But there are other challenges, and so you just have to be aware,
mindful,
that it takes a little while. When you live 45 minutes from the office, it's going to take at least that long for them to even get out there. So patience is a big one when you live out.
Unfortunately, we do hear that on social media a lot, and when members call in and saying like we're always the last person to get power back. Well, unfortunately, sometimes depending on where you live,
that's going to
that's
be the
always
case.
That is always going to be the case. It is true, because if you're one of the last people on the line when there's only 2 or 3 people on the end of that road, they are, like I said, we're going to get the most people first, and that's the way that they are always going to restore. So yes, unfortunately, there's always somebody's going to be last, and it's never fun to be last. But like you said, just be mindful of it and be prepared.
Be prepared.
Have a plan.
Have a generator.
We can actually help with that.
We
have a relationship and can hook you up with a whole house generator.
And one of the other things we hear too a lot of times is, my neighbor has power. Why don't I have power? And I think the other thing that people need to realize too is sometimes different sides of the street are fed, get the electricity delivered from a different line.
Well, not only that, I mean, prime example, we had a thunderstorm last week or the week before. My parents next door had power, and we did not. Transformer, we're on a different transformer. The transformer got hit by lightning, and the crews had to come out and change out our transformer. So my teenagers went next door where there was Wi-Fi, and I didn't have to hear them. But, something as simple as a lightning storm can knock that transformer out. And you're going to be the only one that doesn't have power if you're the only one on that transformer. So, different circuits. You have people next door who might be on different circuits.
And the other thing to remember too is you mentioned Crowfield and an underground, and typically underground is more reliable because it's not up in the air, but at some point there is a line up in the air, and if that line that's feeding your underground gets damaged, well then you're still going to be without power. And then the other part of it too is that when there is an issue with an underground line,
it takes longer.
It takes longer because it's buried. So we're going to have to, do a little bit more, investigation to figure out where the problem is, and then you got to dig it up. So there's trade-offs each way. But and that's why one of the reasons why, as we're going forward, we're converting as much of our system to underground as possible, because it tends to be a little bit more reliable. And when it comes to all these new neighborhoods, trying to put as much underground as we can. And wasn't that long ago that we finally hit that tipping point where the majority of our system is now underground as opposed to overhead.
But you talk to any of our linemen, and they will tell you one of their favorite things to do in their job is to turn the power on during an outage. That they love that, so they are highly motivated, working hard, working safely. If we do have a big storm, they can't operate the buckets if the winds are more than 35 miles per hour. So we do have to wait till conditions are safe for them, but they are getting after it as fast as they can, and everybody at the co-op is supporting that effort.
Yep.
And I mean, one of the things too is that, we take this seriously. We moved into a new location not all that long ago, and, we've got a new state-of-the-art control room that is adjacent to our dispatch. We got a whole new dispatch area where system control, where crews are monitored and we coordinate the outage restoration. We've got the new GIS dashboard, which lets our guys report from the field and upload damage, so we know exactly what needs to be fixed and exactly where it needs to be fixed. So, we've made a lot of upgrades to our storm response system as well. And, right outside the marketing department and not too far away from the studio where we're sitting right now, we've got a commercial kitchen that feeds all those people who are out there, out in the fields restoring your power. So we can make sure that we're keeping everybody fed and working as quickly and as safely as possible. And like we said, safety is our priority. So, we're talking about what we do to try to keep members safe, but what are some of the steps that members can take at home to ensure their safety, and of course those of our line crew as well.
So never assume that a power line is not energized just because it's laying on the ground. I would say that as a mom, that is one of the biggest things that I have always instilled in my kids, and maybe just because I've worked here forever. Don't play on the green boxes. Don't touch anything. Stay away from a power line, even though the power's out. You never know. So, have a healthy respect for the equipment and what it can and can't do. We've already mentioned generator safety, making sure that it's not backfeeding, making sure you have the breakers turned off so it's not feeding through the meter, and don't keep it in an enclosed space. I know the public is inquisitive and members are inquisitive, but giving our folks space to work, I don't want to say they don't need the distraction of members asking them questions, but when we have linemen working in an underground transformer or up in a bucket and somebody's trying to ask them questions, it's not exactly safe for them to not have their full attention on what they're doing. So just give them the space to work, and if you have questions, call us at the office. We're always staffed, and we're happy to answer those questions for you.
We know the community loves our linemen, but when they're working to make repairs, that's probably not the time to chat with them.
And like I said, the longer they're talking to you is the less time they're spending restoring power. So it's natural to want to get as much information as possible, but like I said, give them the space to work, let them work safely, and everybody gets their power on that much sooner.
Well, time flies when you're having fun. We only have a couple more minutes, but, Micah, we always see an increase in traffic on our social media during times of a storm or an outage. What types of information can members expect to find on Facebook or Instagram, and what should they not expect to be able to do on social media?
Well, one of the things that we always try to do is keep our members as informed as possible. We're going to be posting updates and outages pretty much continuously throughout the day, especially during extended outages. We typically, just even during normal storm times, whenever we have something we call a circuit lockout, so when there's something that goes wrong in the substation that affects a substantial amount of people, we're going to start posting. So obviously we're going to be posting all around the clock, pretty much on Facebook and Instagram during the outages. One of the things that we try to do is, obviously we're going to give as much of an estimate as we can, but conditions in the field are very fluid. So we're not going to give you a precise time, because we don't want to say, all right, it's going to be up by midnight, and then something goes on
Yeah.
and it's 2, 3, 4 in the morning and you still don't have power, and creating unreal expectations. We try to do our best to give people the most accurate information that we can.
Yeah, but it's not going to be real specific
No.
information about your house at 123 Main
Because
Street.
I mean the crews, they're moving quickly throughout the areas, getting power on as quickly as possible, so it's a very fluid situation.
Yeah.
One of the things that we definitely would like to ask members not to try to do is report an outage only on Facebook, or even report an outage on Facebook, because it's not tied into our outage system. We can't guarantee that information is going to make it to the people who need to know it. If there is a dangerous situation, sometimes try to report that as many different ways as you can. So I mean, yes, social media, but always make sure you reach out to us through our official channels, either through on Smart Hub or by calling our outage number.
Yep.
Those are the key facts that we need you to make sure that the information gets in the hands of the correct people, so we can address it, in a timely manner.
Well, and like you said, on social media during storms, there tends to be a lot of engagement on those posts. So you would hate for a comment that a member put in there about an outage to go unseen or missed because other things are flowing in. So
Right. Yeah, we can get hundreds of comments on a single post. So I mean, things like I said, they're flowing, coming in fast. So definitely make sure you reach out to us through the official channels. And we're going to do our absolute best to get your power back on as quickly as possible. But speaking about quickly, time flies when you're having fun. So, folks, this is going to do it for this edition of Power Talk. Thank you for tuning in. This is the official broadcast of your electric cooperative, and you can catch up on past episodes on streaming platforms like Spotify, Apple, and iHeartRadio. And as always, get a behind-the-scenes look on Berkeley Electric's YouTube channel. So until next time, this is Power Talk, signing off.